All right, good morning, everyone. Up next, we have Bonnie Tomei with Spectra7. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'd love to share with you about what we're doing at Spectra7 Microsystems. Who are we? We're set up, the company Spectra7 Microsystems, we basically do an analog semiconductor that boosts the signal that serve the broadband market in basically high performance and ultra-thin cabling that enable high-speed connectivity. Very important to note why that is important. The market that we're serving basically are the data center market, which we pivoted about a few years ago into consumer electronics, as well as the AR/VR. Customer that deployed our solution basically will experience a great savings in both CapEx and OpEx. Our analog chip basically goes into the harness of the cables, and Mike Fakatsu here, who is our VP of Marketing, has a sample that's going to pass along and showing you how that's being enabled. Why Spectra7? We have a very highly differentiated solution, and in this very fast growing market. So most recently, Credo just came out and went public with their alternative substitute product, and it's set to be for a market of $1 to $3 billion. And that market is massive because all of the data centers are now experiencing high growth in the need of data speed, as well as building additional data centers in order to serve the needs. And also, not only do we serve the data market, we also most recently announced that we've been powering the top global gaming console manufacturer and helping them to have an interconnect going from the headset into the console. And with that, we have a very strong pipeline of 103 design-ins so far, and only 6 is in production. It is driving the production, our revenue growth that you can see. Just put it into perspective, in 2020, our revenue was only $1 million, and in last year we did 5.5. And this year alone, with our opening orders on hand, about 11 million, we're on track to at least doubling our revenue. First half 2022 revenue guide is $5.3 to $5.6 million, up 300% year over year. We started out with our technology in the consumer and AR/VR headset, and of course it's proven technology because you knew that the little company called Oculus has actually used the Spectra7 chipset for their AR/VR goggle at the time before Facebook acquired them and ultimately have designed out the wire. But as we pivot into the data center using our technology, which is a signal conditioning superior product that is analog to enable the cable to transmit at a very high speed, the application to the data center has been very well received in the market, which is driving our explosive growth. The other markets that we could also serve with our technology are in the automotive. So you just think about how many copper wires there are in a car, and in the EV, actually that amount have tripled. Is that our chip that enabled the copper cabling to transmit in a high speed and a very light, smaller gauge, or higher gauge and a smaller diameter, would definitely play heavily into the EV and automotive market. We also have a design in the 5G market, and if you think about the 5G network core, there is a movement into a architecture on a chassis is called a distributed disaggregated chassis using a pizza box type switches. And our interconnect is going to enable the connectivity with this high speed next to the tower for the high G application. In addition, we can also use our chip embedded onto the switchboard, again, to help with the speed of connectivity. So very, very excitingly, recently we've just said we have powering the top game console manufacturer. Our chipset in the Dreamweaver basically is multiple chips that go into the harness of the headset and then connecting on the other end to the console. And we're very excited about that as it's diversifying our revenue base. Not only are we having a high growth in the data center market, but also serving this top global game console manufacturer. Under NDA, we couldn't share with you who that is, but we're very excited about that into a multi-year project. So why the opportunity? And I think we shared this with you before. The passive the data center market in the Connect has been dominated by basically just regular coppers. In the many, many years of data center being in product, in operations, all of the connectivity has been in the 25, 50, 100 gig. And as the copper cable have these impairments, as the high speed having to go through the cable, the only chance they could really serve that market is if that cable is either thicker or shorter in order to compensate. And what our analog chip can do is basically make it much thinner, high-speed connection, and continue to use the copper. Now, the alternative for everybody is thinking that as data rate now is going up, the only choice they have may be optical. But what we think is most important is that the optical cable have been able to serve high kilometer connectivity, but when you're looking at basically a rack within your server, within your data center, you really don't need anything longer than 2.5 meters, and that's about 6 feet. So having said that, now why would you use an optical cable? When it gives you high quality, but it used a converter to convert the data, the signal coming into optal, and then having to convert it on the other end. And it will use a lot more power. It costs a lot more to buy the optical cable. And where with our product, it basically is thin, light, flexible. And let me share with you about how this the gauge changer is our name, and that it makes it much more bendable, much thinner than a regular cable. It dramatically improves the power consumption. In comparison with the AOC, it's about 2.4 gig versus 28 gig, so it's a 12 times savings on the power. And why is And also, in addition to that, the latency is less than 1 nanometer instead of 250 nanometer comparing to other choices. And again, it's the low cost, which makes it a very good value proposition. And what does that mean when we talk about power? When you can save 17 watts per cable, you're looking at 3.5 megawatts per year. And at 5,000 kilowatt hour, you can save up to 17.6 million a year in just operating expenses, not to mention the savings you would have not having to cool the data center. So with that compelling value proposition, we've been working closely in serving the market that is the most prominent in the hyperscale space. And again, the market drivers are cloud service, our AI, deep learning, 5G rollout, and big data growth. So with that, we wanted to repeat that we have 103 design-ins so far, and the 103 design-ins shows what we are doing in creating the pipeline, a strong pipeline in our revenue to come. Each one of these design-ins are basically SKUs at different length for the application at the end operators, and that they're evaluating our product at this time. And as they're going into production, and remember the few of our revenue is only done by 6 design-ins so far. We're very excited about what's to come. This market, like I said, have been very, identified to be multi-billion dollars. That includes the cable. in our humble opinion, is about 70% CAGR on just the silicon content. By 2025, this is a 400 million plus market, and for Spectra7 currently having, last year having 5.5 million, this is definitely a great opportunity for us to grab on. And we think that being the leader of the space, and just last week, 650 Group came out with a blog. If you can look up their blog or maybe come to our site, you see what they were quoting, basically, that there are only two approach to the short distance data market connectivity market. And Spectra7 is the leader in the lower power option. So with that, the key financial highlights, with the recent macro situation, our stock price definitely have taken a hit. At a trailing 12 months revenue of $7 million, we definitely have a lot of room to grow in our stock in terms of valuation. Our insider ownership is 12.6%. Those are, we have very loyal and long-term supporter, both from the board of directors and officer, as well as long-term holders of our stock. And we do have a convertible debt of $8.2 million that's coming due. We are currently working on resolving, or actually looking at all of the alternatives that we have available, so then it's not dilutive. And we just think that this is a very good inflection point for Spectra7. Our long-term operating model, we target revenue growth at 60% for 4 years, and gross margin is 60 to 65%. The last 12 months, our margin was 53%, and we think this is definitely doable as we are going through in the longer term at this high growth, high margin market of data center. We do see there's a little bit of headwind coming because of the supply chain constraint. The company have seen last quarter at only at 43% gross margin, but that's mainly because of premium cost and other supply chain premium that we were paying. And but we are confident that we could achieve the gross margin of 60 to 65% in the longer run. EBITDA margin target at 25 to 30%. Now in Q4, our EBITDA margin was about a negative 143,000. So I think 25 to 30% as our revenue is ramping is definitely doable. So all in our investment highlight, we have a very large addressable market of 400 million plus. We have a very differentiating technology that will be driving strong traction, and we have already seen the growth that we are right now with just 6 design in production. We're market leader in multiple connectivity markets, and we also, not mentioned a lot, is backed by 55 patents. And that's my presentation. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, sure.
So what is the difference between your product and Credo's?
The question is, what is the difference between our product and the Credo's? And I'm going to go back to the slide deck and show you specifically on the middle column is the Spectra7. We used analog redriver approach, and we basically is an analog semiconductor. And whereas the Credo uses the DSP retimer approach, and what they do is the digital signal processor that converts the signal into digital form and then scramble and putting it out on the other end. So if you think about an analog chips that we have that's just attached and using just 2.4 watts, we don't need to convert any data. And then in addition, we basically, what they call an eye diagram to expand the pipe, so to speak, for transmission, and therefore whatever goes in terms of signal is what comes out on the other end without the scrambling. So if you think about the cost that you have to put in a DSP, as well as the space it takes to have a DSP architecture, in addition to the power to power that DSP to do the scrambling, that's where all of the savings that you see from not having to do that because you don't have to pay for the converter, you don't need to pay for the power. Hope that that answers your question. The question is if we are getting customers in the crypto mining. And crypto mining actually does not require very high speed. They're looking at switches and servers that running at about maybe 10 gig, if not 1 gig. So they're currently using the DAC, the passive copper cables. Question. The question is, what is our cash position? As of Q1, we have 5.2 million. The question is, are we shipping 5G products yet? And if not, when are we anticipating it? So our understanding with the 5G products is currently still under evaluation. We have communications with the cable manufacturer, and we also talk to the customer. Basically, there is still under evaluation. We currently do not have a date. Yes.
So, two questions. Is there any differentiation between a design in and a design win? And of those 103 design ins, how many hyperscale data centers would that entail?
So I think the question is, first, what is the difference between a design in and a design win? A design in for us is really been, as we have said before, is basically each one of the SKUs that we have with our manufacturer. So the process goes like this. Let's assume that one of the hyperscalers are looking for a 2.5 meter, 400 gig solution for their data center. In that case, we would then work with a cable manufacturer, or the cable manufacturer may be calling us, and we put together this cable for their evaluation. And once they accepted that cable for that spec, they're going to go into evaluation. Each one of these SKUs that we have is what we call design in. So there are 103 cable SKUs, if you will, under evaluation at the moment. And 6 of them are in production. So the design win in that case would be 6 design wins.
And then how many data centers, this 103, how many data centers would that encompass?
The way we kind of do the math is if you think about the Tencent situation, which we have shared with the shareholders before, is that 6 cables or 6 design ins were in production for one hyperscale data center operator. So if we just use an average of 5, that may be a good, that may be a good way of calculating it. But we're not sharing that information at the moment. Question.
In following this story for a while, you've had this technology for several years, and then all of a sudden, it seems like you started to get orders. Was there some, I don't know, point in time where customers said, "Oh, I need this," and they didn't need it before? What was the tipping point?
The question is, what is the tipping point of the market adoption, I believe? So the tipping point for the market adoption for us, we thought that back in 2017, when we pivoted into the data center market, was that the market was ready. And as we know, it's taken some time. And this is 2022. And what happened is we started realizing that the data rate continued to be at the 10 gig, 25 gig, 40 gig, and even 100 gig. And so you can see why the data center operators have been using the DAC, right, using the passive copper, and have been able to do the job. And I think that we think that as a company that just recently the market now is adopting the higher speed. And so we're going to start seeing a lot of this explosion of adoption in the coming year, if not already happening right now. So did it happen last year? I think we saw a solve adoption, And right now, we're starting seeing the market is definitely picking up. Sir.
Of the 11 million that you're projecting this year, how much of that is coming from the video game?
We currently, so the question is, out of the 11 million of the customer orders, how much of it is coming from AR, VR customer? And we currently have not broken that up yet and share.
Is it within the 11 million?
Yes, it is. The question is if the AR, VR design win is included in the 11 million, and the answer is yes.